Good morning, everybody. Come on in. I'm not a morning person. How about you? I'm still glad I stayed up late last night. It was fun. Hello, Amy. Amy Zev, everybody. And she's taking over solo today, so we're going to wear her out. No, we got somebody else. Who was our other person? Amy Cosmore, welcome. Have you been to the Florida Festival before? Ah, great. That's wonderful. We always love to see new people. Well, Sunday is, for many people, a very sacred time, Sunday morning. So, keeping that image in our mind and that mood in our mind, I want to take a moment before we get going with the stories to remember and to honor some of the storytelling voices we lost this year from our membership. Phyllis Neesmith, Ray Gant, Fred Kahn, and many of you knew our friend Angela Lloyd. Each of these tellers brought their own unique voices to storytelling, and we're going to miss their friendship. We're going to miss their deep, caring, creative spirits. We like to think of ourselves as a storytelling community, but even more a storytelling family, and each of us is so important to that mix. So I hope that you will think about joining us throughout the year and next year's festival. As a member, you get our newsletter, you get to hear about other upcoming events, but also as a volunteer. It's just more fun, maybe a little more tiring, but just more fun when you're involved with the festival and some of the other Zoom meetings and things we're going to have going on this year. So please think about joining us. So we honor our past, the present, what a wonderful weekend we've had, our future selves, and most of all, we honor our common humanity. So, our dear Robin Rennick, speaking of just life's stuff, Robin was going to be our first teller, and her mom passed away. So she's not here with us. I think it's okay that I say that. So if you do know Robin, send her some condolences and whatever way we can support her going forward. But we get to start with Janelle Woodland. Janelle, last year I bought the mug from one of your tall tales. What is that creature's name again? Boobaloo. I got the Boobaloo mug. It's one of the wonderful things about getting souvenirs from our store is I use it every day for tea at night, and I think of Boobaloo and of Janelle. And I love to think about her because she's such an eclectic storyteller. She can tell these tall tales like Boobaloo. She can tell family stories. She can tell stories from history. And so I want you to welcome her as part of the member showcase, but keep on your radar that next year she is one of the featured tellers at the Florida Storytelling Festival. Please welcome Janelle Woodland.
You get two chances in life at a mother-daughter relationship. The first is as a daughter to your mother, and the second is as a mother to your daughter. I read that years ago in a self-help magazine. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it made me think of a sandwich. I shared the article with my mom, and she thought of a sandwich too. Clearly, we are related. She saw herself as a pleasantly plump little bottom bun, and me as a practically perfect piece of pastrami on top. And then my one day, someday future daughter would round out our mother-daughter sandwich. Mom told me that from the time she was a little girl, she dreamed of a daughter of her own. And here I was, the fulfillment of her heart's desire. Mom and I shared so much. I have her eyes. I have her nose. I even have her handwriting. And there is a goofy, playful, prankster place in my heart that I know comes directly from that woman. Her favorite game was to make eye contact with the people in other cars at a stoplight and then to flick her false teeth at them. I have all my own teeth, so I lack the necessary equipment to play this game. But I have been known to take a magic marker to the grocery store and draw startled expressions on the bananas. Mom and I shared a lot, but one thing we never shared, not even for a second, was the desire for a daughter of my own. I saw our mother-daughter sandwich as more of an open-faced affair. Like, there would be Mom, and then me, and then some beloved pets perhaps on top, like gravy. And I was fine with that, which is why it came as such a surprise in my late 20s when my heart gave itself to a man with not one, not two, but 3 children from his first marriage, 2 boys and a girl. Greg, Patrick, and Kelly were 14, 10, and 8 when I came into their lives. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that's great, Janelle. Mother-daughter sandwich complete, and you don't even have to have stretch marks. But I am telling you, it is not that simple. Kelly already had a mom, a good mom, who loved her very much. And there was no way I was going to push myself into that mother-daughter sandwich. And I just wasn't sure if there was room in her 8-year-old heart to be part of mine. So what do you do with that? I'll tell you what I did. I took a page from my mother's recipe book. Mom always said, if you want to cook up a relationship with someone, love them as they are. So that's what I did with Kelly. She was fascinated with princesses, so I took her to Disney movies. And when she showed an interest in glitter nail polish, I had her give me a manicure. But when that kid dyed the neighbor's cat orange for Halloween, my prankster heart sparked with recognition of potential. And I taught her the fine art of squirt gun warfare, including the ambush of the unsuspecting adult. The kid was a natural. And that's how we forged our bond. You want to cook up a relationship with someone? Love them as they are. And that's the recipe I was following years later when I cooked up the idea for a multi-generational shopping trip. By that time, Kelly was 16 years old, and her second home was the mall. And my mom had a lifelong relationship with shopping, and I had a good job with disposable income. It seemed like we had all the necessary ingredients for our mother-daughter sandwich. We decided to start our adventure at the mall by having lunch together at the TGI Fridays across the street. And when we had finished our meal, we reckoned it'd be easier to use the restroom here than to trudge all the way through the mall to the public restrooms there. So that's what we did. We made our way through the tables to the ladies' room, Mom, me, Kelly, laughing, singing a song. I opened the door to the ladies' room, and there were 3 stalls in there, perfect. Mom went to the far stall. I went in the middle. Kelly went in the first. And when I closed the door to my stall, I noticed it had one of those gigantic round rolls of toilet paper, and that inspired my prankster heart. And I quick pulled off 2 big wads of toilet paper, and I climbed up on top of the toilet stool, and reaching over the top, I yelled, "Air raid!" and threw the wads of toilet paper and looked over, only to discover it was not my mom in the far stall. Yes, I had looked over the top and dropped the wad of toilet paper on the head of a complete stranger. I sank down. I listened. I waited. And when I was reasonably certain that that woman had left, I opened the door to my stall. And there stood Mom and Kelly, arms crossed. That's the kind of thing that'll get you arrested. "Mom, I swear I thought it was you." "Nah, I put my hand on the door, but it was locked. So I had to wait." "But did you see her when she left? Was she mad?" She's a bit confused, but I flicked my teeth at her and she ran away." Kelly shook her head. "Target identification and acquisition are among the first rules of squirt gun warfare." The kid was right. I had made a rookie mistake. I'm just imagining what her story is to her people when she gets back to her table. Good point, Kelly. And with that, the 3 of us quickly made our way out of the restaurant, over to the mall, and began our day. And as we spent the afternoon together shopping, we would spontaneously erupt into bursts of laughter as one of us would imagine this whole scenario from that poor woman's point of view. And when we caught sight of her across the way in the Macy's store, we laughed so hard they nearly had to call for a cleanup on aisle 3. I don't remember a single thing we bought that day, and I will never forget the laughter that we shared. You get 2 chances in life at a mother-daughter relationship. The first is as a daughter to your mother. Mom has been gone for over 20 years, and yet I see her face every time I look in the mirror. The second is as a mother to your daughter. Kelly and I don't share any biology, but when my heart looks at her heart, it recognizes kin, and that is a bond every bit as thick as blood. The daughter of my mother and the mother of the daughter of my heart. And that is a mother-daughter sandwich that feeds the soul. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. I feel similarly. I have 2 boys of the heart, not of the womb. I got them when they were 6 and 8 years old, and they're now in their 50s. How did that happen? Okay. I want to take this last opportunity in this member showcase to thank so many sponsors. Lakeside Inn, the McGlynn Foundation that supported our storytelling in the schools the week before this festival. The Mount Dora Chamber of Commerce has been super, super supportive. And again, Lake County has the Heads in Bed Tourist Grant. So if you get a chance to fill out that survey and we can prove to them that this festival increases tourism in Lake County, that would be very helpful. Well, I want to thank once again, we have thanked them several times, but we can't thank them enough. Ron Red, who is doing all this video work for us. Would you give him a round of applause, please? I don't know if you've ever been to a festival where the sound isn't good. Doesn't quite work, so we are so lucky to have him. Well, this is another teller who can do it all. from lying tales to real life stories. And today she's going to tell us a story. Right now she's calling Unfinished Business, but maybe it's unfinished. I don't know. But Unfinished Business. It's a true story that even her own children couldn't believe for quite a while was actually true. She's going to take us from St. Augustine to Paris, and we're going to travel with the winner of the Stone Soup Storytelling Festival's Liars Contest in South Carolina, that is, and the first place in the slam contest at the National Festival in Jonesboro, Tennessee. Why is Wanda Violet getting so much recognition? We're about to find out. Wanda Violet.
A long time ago, many years ago, I was married to a man who called himself a minister. And yes, he did. He ministered to some folks, especially to himself, but me, not too much. My time with him was filled with neglect, abuse, and persistent, crushing poverty. At one time, we lived in St. Augustine, Florida. You know that town, don't you? That old ancient city where people come from all over the world to stroll and shop and sightsee. And one day while we were there, it was a particularly difficult day. And I just had to get out of the house, you know. So I got in the car and drove downtown, got out and went for a walk. And of course, what street do you walk on in St. Augustine? St. George Street. And so while I was there, I started looking around at me and around me, and I saw all these tourists. There they were in their sandals and their shorts and their brightly colored T-shirts, and there I was in my long faded denim skirt and a button-up cotton blouse and hair that fell below my waist. As I made my way down the street, I was just trying to take it all in, looking at the tourists, oh, the smells. I mean, I know that the Spanish bakery was in full bake mode that day. It was wonderful. And the candy factory, they were making, I'm positive, my favorite candy, pralines, you know, with the pecans in the middle. I've got a believer right there. And and then I heard something. Above the noise of the crowd, I could hear some music. It was lovely, beautiful, ethereal kind of music and notes coming toward me above the heads of the crowds. And they came right to me and reached into me and pulled on my heart, tugging me, pulling me forward. I had to go find the source of that music. And so I went on down the street a little bit further and I found it. There in an alleyway on the left was a group of musicians. There were 5 men standing there playing that amazing music, and it was glorious. I stood there for a long time and I listened and I looked at them and I studied them, their faces, their brightly colored ponchos, their instruments. I don't know what they were. They had like reed flutes, and one guy had, you know, a pan flute that has the different lengths, right? And then they had some unusual stringed instruments. But I remember this one guy over there on the right at the end. He played this little guitar-like thing high up on his chest above his round belly. That music was magic. And for a few moments, it fed my hungry soul, lifted my spirit, and brought a little light into my dark world. It was about then that I noticed a TV tray over on the side, you know, one of those rickety collapsible TV trays, you know, and it had CDs on it. And it said, a little sign said, CDs, $10. I wanted one of, I needed one of those. I needed to take that music home with me. But I didn't have $10. I didn't have 5. So after a few minutes, I walked away, and I left that music there on that little alley in St. Augustine, Florida. Well, a good bit of time passed, and I made up my mind one day that I was ready to leave that dark place. I did. Pulled up a U-Haul truck, packed a few things, and headed off down the interstate. And after a good bit of searching, I finally found a pretty good job. It paid well enough, and I became the assistant to one of the lead scientists at the National High Magnetic Field Laboratory. Have you ever heard of it? It's in Tallahassee at FSU. Go Noles. But they give tours, so if you go through Tallahassee, give them a call and see if they'll give you a tour. It's fascinating. And I had been there a few weeks, and my boss, the scientist, called me in. He said, we have to help run this magnetic conference. It's an annual event, and this year it'll be in Torino, Italy. Would you want to go? Would I want to go? I tried to act mature. But I'd never been out of the country, if you don't count Canada and Alaska. So yes, I got to go. And I'm telling you, that whole Italian adventure was amazing. I'll have to tell you about it sometime, okay? But when it finished, we all packed up and went back to our respective countries and homes. But I made one layover. Paris, France. You know Paris, the city of lights, the city of magic. I mean, it was a childhood dream of mine to see the Eiffel Tower. And see it, I did. Why, the day I landed, I was able to secure a spot on a ferry ride that was going up the Seine River. It was billed as a romantic nighttime cruise up the River Seine, ending with dinner on the Eiffel Tower. Me, I had dinner on the Eiffel Tower. I was the only single person on the boat. I didn't care. After all, I was in love with Paris. Well, the next morning, a group of us got together, and this nice man took us to see more of Paris in his van, and he drove us up this mountain, and up at the top was this very old cathedral, very fancy-looking thing, and he said, and he stopped the van, and he said, now, you all can get out here and you can go inside the cathedral, and there's self-guided tours. You know how that works. You get a brochure and you work your way around. He said, it is well worth your time. Now he said, some of my customers simply go in there and sit down and pray. And that sounded good too. But he said, whatever you do, make sure that you go over there to those steps. And I could see him from where he was. He said, at the bottom of those steps, you will get the best view of the whole city of Paris. Well, you know me. You know where I went. I went for the walk. So I went over to the steps where he directed us, and I started down. Step, step, landing, step, step, landing, step. And I heard something. It was music. It was lovely, beautiful music. These notes seemed to come right through that gray, misty, cold October air around me. And they came right to me and reached into my heart and tugged on it, pulling me forward. I had to go find the source of that music, right? And I found it. It was down there at the bottom of the steps on the landing. There was a music group. There were 5 men. And they had on these brightly colored ponchos and unusual stringed instruments and pan flutes. And there was this one guy at the end, I still remember, he played an unusual little stringed instrument up high on his chest above his round belly. Yes, there in Paris, France, the city of magic, were the same musicians who had fed my hungry soul and lifted my spirit and brought some light to a dark world on that little alley in St. Augustine, Florida. And this time I sat down on one of those steps and I let that moment and that music drown me. And then I saw, guess what I saw? The little rickety TV tray. And the sign on it that said CDs, $10. And this time, I had the $10.
Hello, other Amy. Well, we started this short showcase this morning remembering Phyllis and Ray, Fred, and Angela. And I thought since our time is shorter this morning, that maybe we could bring some other people into the room. So if you're willing, would you be allowed to just open your mouth, whisper or shout a name of a loved one you would like us to hear, remember, and honor? Anybody? Michael. Mikey. Thank you. And if you think about it today, and we've got this little extra time before our featured teller concert, maybe you tell somebody a little bit of a story about them to keep their memory alive through your stories. Would you do that? That'd be kind of nice. I'm here. I'll hear anybody's story about anybody. Well, it is a shorter concert today, but it still was mighty, wasn't it? Bring Janelle and Wanda back up here. Come on. Come on. So we've got a little bit of time. I can't quite see if they're still letting people buy things at the store. You could still browse a little bit anyway, but come right back. We are? Yes, Robin, thank you. So, yeah, here's your last chance to go home with a souvenir, something you can listen to, something you can read. And we'll be back here. We're still going to do the next concert at the start time we have in the program because some people will just be arriving. So stay around for the last concert of the day. Thank you. We're going to start at 10 o'clock for the next concert.
Good morning, folks. Our next program will kick off right at 10 a.m. 10 a.m. We're going to get things started. You're plenty of time to come on in, find the best seat. Hey, what do you say? You meet somebody new. You look around. Hey, I don't know that person. Say hi. Introduce yourself. Or head to the shop and take home some souvenirs. Once again, 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. Going to get started at 10 o'clock. That is 15 minutes, 34 seconds. Good morning, listeners. It is 10 a.m. Our next program is about to begin. We would encourage you to make your way in, to find a chair, have a seat, and get ready to share.
Everyone, please make your way to your seat so that we can get started. The lovely conversations at the back of the room, please make your way to your seats and we'll begin. Well, that had an effect. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final concert of the Florida Storytelling Festival. What a few days it has been, huh? Whoa. My name is Janelle Woodland, and I am going to be your guide through this final concert. And we have such an amazing lineup of featured tellers. And this is our last chance to savor them in person at this festival, but we can take them home from the bookstore and follow them as they share their stories in other places across the country. I'd like to begin by thanking Joel, the festival director. What an amazing job he has done. Thank you, Joel. Yes. It takes a village to produce a festival like this, and that village is also called the Florida Storytelling Association Board. Thank you to all of the board members who made this wonderful event. Now, if you happened to have brought a magical rectangular information device, I encourage you at this moment, even if you thought you turned it off in the room before you came down here, take that little cauldron of information out and just put it to sleep. Turn it off. It will thank you for this break. And trust me, your heart will feel a certain freedom while that little puppy sleeps in your pocket. What an amazing few days we have had together. And as we come together in this last concert of the festival, let's just take a moment and breathe together. And as we come together in breath, we come together in story. Now, I've seen a lot of people smile throughout my lifetime, but only a handful whose soul sparkles through their smile like Linda Chancey Guice. Her love of stories and her love for us, the listeners, shine through her eyes as she tells. We're so blessed to bask in her warmth and share in her stories. Please help me welcome to our stage Linda Chancey Guice.
You're so sweet. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, if you will. And can you put that stool up here just in case? Okay. Okay. Well, I'll get it all together in a minute. You know, when y'all that understand this, when your eyes start to get when your eyelids start to get too big and they start flopping down, and the doctors start saying, "Would you like me to do an eye lift on you? How can my eyes sparkle?" You know, it's like, oh golly. Well, you know what? Hasn't it been wonderful? Okay. You meet new people, you make new friends, you have old friends come and support you, and I've had that. Two of my dearest friends are here. Thank you. Thank you. Is this how you do it? Thank you. And my family, half of them are here. Thank you. And I've met these sweet people here. Thank you. And and the people that put it on. Woo! It's a lot of work. Okay, let me get started here. This story is about my daughter, Tara. I got you, didn't I? She won't remember it, though, because she was a tiny baby when it happened. A long time ago, in 1975, I had a baby girl named Tara. I named her after a soap opera figure. Well, we lived in a little blue house in Homeland, Florida. We had moved back there from college. For 4 years, I'd been in college with my husband, Ted, her dad, and he had not quite finished yet. So he was still in college when we moved back, and he transferred from Santa Fe, which my grandson's going to now, to Florida Southern College. And he was studying when this story took place. I, however, was reading Dr. Spock. That, for those of you who don't know, he was the guru of childhood rearing and having a baby back then, and being a librarian. I just had to read Dr. Spock, and I was a nervous wreck because he told you how to do everything, and I was trying to do it just like he said. In college in Gainesville, we had immediately gone out and gotten a dog. So we had had our dog for 4 years. His name was Winston, after Winston Churchill. But he was only about this big. He was a little brown, half Chihuahua, half Fox Terrier. Real slick hair, just cute, sweet little dog. I loved him so much. He was my baby for 4 years. And I was raised in a big family. I had 3 younger sisters, so you would have thought I'd be very comfortable because I had babysat, and I had actually 2 sisters, 9 and 11 years younger, and I carried them on both hips sometimes, when they were little. And my sister Mary was 5 years younger. But anyway, that dog, I don't know, I just felt like its parent. But when I read Dr. Spock and I got worried about germs, when we moved back from college, I put the dog outside. Please forgive me. But I was worried about germs, and this baby was coming. Well, she finally got there, June the 1st, 1975. And she had a lot of hair, just a lot of hair. She was so unusually beautiful, of course. Well, I was a nervous Nellie mama. She was probably 6 or 8 weeks old at this time, so we were in the hot part of the summer. No air conditioning in our house. It was an old house built up, had that space underneath it. And on the very far side of it, there was a big propane tank. And I guess that gas line went under the house and then up into the wall heater in the middle of the house between the 2 bedrooms. And my husband and I had noticed it was kind of hot when you walked by that heater, but it was so hot, we also were, even for college students, we were pretty dumb about mechanical things like heaters. I got married at 19. Don't do that, anybody in here. That's too young. Anyway, and so here I was, college degree, expecting my first child, and I didn't know that the pilot light was on in that thing. The pilot light was lit in the middle of summer. The landlord should have told us, but he didn't. So he was studying, I was running back and forth, checking on the baby, checking on the diapers. I did my diapers in Dressed, and I rinsed them twice. There was no such thing as disposable diapers, I don't think. Were there? 75? I sure didn't know about them. And I was very careful to pin them without sticking the baby. Remember, we'd put our hands down under and stick ourselves instead of the baby? Oh, I was trying to be a good mama. I was nursing. I was a nursing snob. I guess La Leche League had started back then. Yeah, and the father was even allowed to come into delivery. They were beginning that, but my husband wouldn't go in. It was okay. I was ripping his shirt off, cursing him while I was in labor. Not really, but anyway, not really. I made that up. But anyway, So here we are in this little setting. We had moved back here. My husband was finishing up school, and I was being a mama. Now, I had 18 diapers that day to hang on the line. And I hung them up, and I was so proud. I got them. There were short diapers and there were long diapers. Do y'all remember those? There are a lot of women and men nodding their heads. And I put them in order, of course, the short ones and then the long ones. And it was so hot that they were almost drying as I was hanging them out. But I was not going to let those diapers get wet. I was watching for the rain, and trying to be real good. And so I had gone in, and I hate to tell you this part, 2-year-old is going to hate me. PETA may arrest me. But my dog had run away. He'd been missing about a week. And I was heartbroken. I felt so guilty. And everybody was helping me look. My husband had ridden around all over Homeland, which was about 7 streets, and we couldn't find him. Well, I had prayed for forgiveness and asked God to help him come home. It was pitiful. And so anyway, I was outside looking for the dog all the time, hanging up diapers, checking on the baby. Well, I had put her down for her morning nap. Dr. Spot said there should be 2 naps a day. I was trying to make everything work out by that book. And so I put her in that bedroom. The heater was here, bedroom here, bedroom here. I'd use the only fan we had in her room. And I'd even put a wet towel on the fan to cool the air a little bit. Did y'all ever do that? Yeah. Florida's hot. And so she was down in her crib right by that window, and outside was that propane tank. And I had put a wet pad under her. No rubber pants for my baby. Remember rubber pants? You put them on to keep the baby dry. And no, not me. I had a wet pad under her. It was so hot she had nothing on but a diaper. And I checked on her, and she was sound asleep. I went out and listened for my husband. He was still in there studying. I went out to check the diapers. And when I did, I saw the most amazing miracle in the world. But it wasn't my dog. It was a Chihuahua mama dog with a puppy. It was a brown mama dog, very much smaller than my dog, with a white Chihuahua puppy. They were out under the blackberry bushes. We have blackberry bushes along a fence there. It's a big yard with a big double carport on the back. And it was boiling hot, and she was just hassling, and you could tell she was a stray. Now, in Homeland, Florida, people dumped dogs in those years. Remember when people would just dump dogs in rural areas that they didn't want? Did anybody have that experience? Yep. Did you take in a dog? Yep, you did. I wanted those dogs. I wanted both of them. I immediately started strategizing. I ran in the house and got some milk. I didn't know, you probably shouldn't have given her milk. Probably water would have been better, but I took milk because I was lactating. And so was she. And I coaxed her out, put down the milk. Oh, and she started lapping it up. And the baby was struggling. They were tired. You could tell they'd just been dumped out. She had fleas, and I was strategizing with our budget, How would I take her to the vet? How would I get her fixed? How would I keep her and the puppy? And then my dog would come home, and they'd be a family. He'd marry her, and they'd have more puppies. I was also hormonal. And so, well, she looked pretty good. I coaxed her all the way to the carport where it was cooler. She flopped over. The baby started to nurse. Oh, I was so happy. And I ran in the house to check on the baby. Well, she was sound asleep. My husband was still studying, so I went back outside about 20 minutes later to check on the dogs. They were nowhere to be seen. Now, where could that mama dog and that puppy go in just a short 20 minutes? How could she disappear on a 1/4 of an acre lot with, open space? I looked under all the blackberry bushes. I looked all under the car. I looked around the front yard where there was some boxwood, like a big boxwood hedge. She wasn't in there. She wasn't anywhere. How could this be? I couldn't believe it. And then I thought, look under the house, dummy. So I went around by Tara's bedroom window, And I looked under the house because there was a crawl space. You know how Florida, not that high, but you know how Florida houses were built up so that the air would flow under? And I got down right by that propane tank, and I looked under the house for the mama dog, and I didn't see a dog. What I saw struck terror in my heart, and I began to scream, "Fire! Fire!" And there was a flame under Tara's bedroom. It was about this high. That propane pipe had a hole in it somehow. It had worked a hole in itself somehow. Maybe, I don't know how. And that pilot light was lit, so the flame came up right there. It was burning under that old wooden floor. I don't know how long. It couldn't be too long because the floor wasn't on fire. The beam wasn't on fire yet, but I spotted it. I started leaping and hopping. Fire! Fire! And I ran in the house. I ran straight into her bedroom, screaming fire. My husband almost flipped over backwards in his chair, running out, saying, "Where?" And I was screaming, "Gas tank! Gas tank!" And I ran in here. This part's funny. I grabbed that sleeping baby, jerked her up, screaming fire. She's still traumatized. I tell her that's why she's short. And she tried to cry, but she went, and I went leaping and hopping out of the house with the baby. And when I passed her crib, I felt the warmth. Nothing was on fire, though. And I ran outside with her in the open air, screaming and crying, and I stopped screaming fire. My husband had sense enough. He had a college degree. He went all the way to the gas tank, found the valve, and cut the gas off. And the flame went, oh, thank God. Thank God. I was almost passed out with relief. And he came to me and he hugged us both and he said, "Why did you look under the house?" And all I could say was, "Dogs, dogs, dogs." He didn't slap me, but he probably should have. Well, when it was all over, we never saw those dogs again. But a week later, Winston came home. And I put him in the house. And I threw Dr. Spock out the window. Thank you.
You can tell where it goes by the wet spot. You know, they say sometimes angels come in the disguise of strangers, and I guess they also come as chihuahuas. Apparently. What a great story, Linda. Thank you. They're folding it up now, but I want to thank Robin Schulte and the amazing job that she does with the bookstore. Yay, Robin! So much coordination that happens there. And the other fairy behind the scene is Louise O'Leary, who handles so many of the logistical things to make this festival happen. Thank you, Louise. To paraphrase Shakespeare, though she be but little, she be mighty. There's nothing small about the stories Carol Birch has shared with us during this festival. She's told us stories of her mother and her father, her Aunt Lottie, her cousin Martha, and in so doing, the powers of her stories have weaved a connection between all of us and made us family as well. Please help me welcome Carol Birch.
All right. Well, hi there. The next story is not a personal story. Amazing. But my next personal story will be about my mother's father, who was the last man to haul steel with a team of horses in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So that's the next story that the family, as I fell out the tree. This story, I went to Nebraska in January to tell stories at a residency, and I also went to Duluth, Minnesota, where it can be cold, in January. And my husband's like, "Why are you going to these places in January?" But I said, "Well, because people who live where it's cold, their lives don't stop because it's winter." And he went to the dump in Southbury, Connecticut, where we live, found a book that had the word Nebraska in it. So he brought it home. And that book had a little page, and that page introduced me to this story, which I am thrilled to tell you. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, thrust our nation into the Second World War and into kind of a despair. Our nation fell. Everybody mobilized for war, but there were other people who set about repairing our tattered spirits. And nowhere was this more clearly done than in North Platte, Nebraska, where some people heard that their boys from the local National Guard, that they would be coming through on the noon train. So 200 of them went down to give them a very personal send-off. The crowd grew during the afternoon to 500 people, but no military came through the train depot. Finally, at the end of the day, a train did come through, and it had 300 soldiers from Kansas. Now, Ray Wilson looked at the chocolate chip cookies she had baked for her brother. She eyed those strangers. And then she said, "I'm not taking these cookies home. It just broke the ice." Everyone, those 500 people, showered all their gifts on 300 strangers from Kansas. And then Ray went home and wrote a letter, said, "I don't know how many of you were down at the depot on Wednesdays, but those of you who weren't there, you should have been there." To see the way it raised the morale of those boys, it would put us on our feet and help us remember we're really at war. Let's do something, and let's do it in a hurry. She was 26 years old, the clerk in the local drugstore, and she offered to run a canteen. The town council approved it, and it opened Christmas Day, 1941. What did those young men find? And young women, too. They found a hero's welcome in North Platte with warm smiles, cold milk, hot cups of coffee. It was Ray's vision that each of them would be greeted, fed, and thanked as they were given refreshments. The menu varied, but every day there were sandwiches and birthday cakes because you just never knew. It sounds impossible, but it happened. The numbers are staggering. 12,500 people lived in North Platte. But they fed between Christmas Day, 1941, and April 1st, 1946, after the war was over. During that time, they fed more than 5 million young women and men. And they fed them from their own gardens, their own farms, their own rations. It sounds biblical, doesn't it? It's kind of like the story of the loaves and fishes. But it happened. it happened. Where did the food come from? Well, I told you it came from their own gardens, but there were also special things that happened, like those men up in Stapleton, Nebraska. They organized huge pheasant hunts. And when they dressed the pheasants, they would save the tail feathers so that a young soldier might put it in his cap. The young men would come into the canteen. The trains all stopped in North Platte because it was a servicing point on the Union Pacific Railroad. The young men and women would come in for, 10 to 20 minutes, and they would be fed and greeted and thanked. They were children, mostly boys, teenagers, really. Teenagers in stiff new uniforms with ears that stuck out like flags after military barbers buzz cut their hair in less than a minute. A kid could put a sandwich under his arm like this, and holding a cup of coffee or a bottle of milk, he'd balance some cake or something on top, and then he'd be reaching in with his other hand and saying, hey, what do I owe you for all this? And the answer was always the same: you don't owe us a thing. All over Nebraska, there were train depots, and at most of those train depots, what was donated were ammunition. That's what was loaded onto the trains. But in North Platte, their goal was to raise morale. They had a piano in the canteen, and whenever young men and women filled the canteen, somebody would tickle the keys. They might tickle the keys so that there could be a little two-step around the floor, or sometimes they would sing songs around the piano. There was a woman named Marge who worked at the canteen, and her son had been killed. And she said to the women who worked there, I can't do it anymore. I just can't come down there. Looking at those faces so eager for a fight, not knowing what it might cost them. No one blamed her for staying home. But after some time, she found no solace in the empty house and came back to the canteen to feed another mother's child. One day, some airmen pulled her into their circle around the piano. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, ready, you can sing with me, ready to meet our thunder. Adam, boys, give her the gun. Down we dive, spouting our flames from under, off with one hell of a roar. We live in fame or go down in flames. Hey, nothing can stop the Army Air Corps, because that's what it was back then. I know. Marge never told those boys why tears slipped down her cheeks. Now, mostly Ray Wilson, and after her, a woman named Helen Christ, organized the food donations that came in from 125 towns in a 200-mile radius. And they also scheduled, over all those years, 55,000, mostly women volunteers. Someone was at the canteen at 5 in the morning when it opened, and there were people there through the day until after the last train came through at midnight. Talk about executive abilities. First it was Ray Wilson, and then it was a woman named Helen Christ. So mostly there were all these women involved, but I want to tell you about one boy, because one boy helped. Gene Slattery was 9 years old when the war started. He knew he was a little boy, but he wanted to help the big war effort. And so He didn't know how he was going to do it, but he went with his dad one day to a farm auction. He loved to be at a farm auction with his dad, where the smells of men and sweat and animals and sawdust swirled around them. He hadn't planned it, but when his two unruly goats, that's who they were selling, came into the arena, he stood up and he just blurted out, "Money from the sale of these goats will go to the North Platte Canteen." And people chuckled over his exuberance. The incantation began and ended with "sold." And then a man who was sitting some ways behind Gene leaned over. "What are you going to do next, boy? Sell the shirt off your back?" Well, that sounded good to Gene. He didn't look at his dad. He just jumped into the arena, took off his flannel shirt, handed it to the auctioneer. "Sold" rang out. And when he looked at his dad, he was so relieved because he saw how his dad's smile just eased all those lines of worry in his face. That sale jump-started trips all over Nebraska and nearby towns in Kansas and Colorado. Bidding on shirts gave the men who were stuck on the farm, gave those men a way to do a little for those who were off fighting. When a man won the shirt, most of them said, "Don't think this is going to fit me." They'd hand it back. Gene would take it and sell it again. Lots of littles added up to thousands of dollars. And the most one shirt ever got was $1,700 at a war bonds rally in North Platte at the Paramount Theater. There must have been some high rollers there, because in today's money, that is $30,474. Dazzling amount. But everyone did what they could. And Joe Hirschfeld, who owned the dry goods store in North Platte, he said to Gene, you ever need a shirt, you just come see me." And he did more than 70 times. And I would say that was also dazzling, was it not? Oh, the North Platte Canteen is such a bright spot in our past. And it's good to remember what a community can do when it comes together. And it's good to remember who's responsible. We're the ones who need to pull together. It's always necessary. Well, the hopes for peace after the Second World War have given way to a kind of disillusionment, hasn't it? But it is good to remember a shining moment when young men and women came into a little town on the prairie, and they were greeted, fed, and thanked by strangers. So they waved goodbye to them at the end. Hey, goodbye, thank you. Off they went into their wild blue yonder, and they were armed. They had pockets full of cookies, and sometimes they even had a feather in their cap. Hey, thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you so much. I don't live near a train station, but I recently moved to Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm thinking my neighbors could use some connection. You have inspired me. I am going to make chocolate chip cookies. and leave them on people's door. Thank you, Carol. Speaking of hospitality, a little shout out to the Lakeside Inn in the wonderful town of Mount Dora for hosting us. Yes. Before this festival, I only saw Paul Strickland's work on Zoom, where he was confined to a little square. And it was great and wonderful, but being here these past few days and getting to experience his playful prankster energy in person, my heart recognizes a kindred spirit. Paul bends and twists fairy tales until we can see the truth of ourselves in these stories. His unique take on folk tales serves us a map to our own common humanity. Let's welcome Paul Strickland.
It's so good to be here with y'all for this final concert. And Carol, what a beautiful, beautiful, well-researched, factual. We're going to go a different route now. I'm going to follow my heart on this. My head tells me to go one way, but I'm going to follow my heart. And I want to tell two folk tales, reupholstered folk tales that are about complicated hope. This first story, when I heard it the first time, the person who told it to me, they call this story, because he doesn't title his stories, which I've found to be kind of awkward. So I call it Bursting into Birds. Way back ago, there was a town that had a parade every single year on the same day. And when I say parade, even though it was way back ago, it's exactly what you think whenever I say parade. There was a group of people in the middle of a road and people lined up on both sides of the road. And there were children that were marching down and waving at their parents. And there were musicians that were... And there were horses pulling carts and horses pulling floats as people were going by, and everyone was talking and enjoying one another. And one day during this parade, all of a sudden everything stopped, dead still, completely silent. Everyone just looked up, mouths agape, staring up. Everything was silent except for one toddler. A child was crying out loud, sitting on her bottom. She was perfectly safe, but she was crying because she was so startled. Now, in the line of people on both sides of that road, one of the people in that group of people was a tadult. It goes newborn, infant, child, toddler, tween, teen, tadult, taxpayer, cadaver, right? This tadult's name was Timothy, and Timothy was indolent. Timothy was kind of lethargic. He would never have said any of those things because lazy is only 2 syllables. Timothy was lazy, extremely lazy. And he wasn't lazy because he was a tadult. I need y'all to understand that. There's plenty of tadults in the world today that work hard, that work smart, that work at all. Timothy was lazy, and he always had been. Y'all, when he was born, the nurse had to ask him twice to cry. As a toddler, he just didn't, I mean, people one time recently, thank you, Carol, I'm glad you liked that joke. People tell me all the time, they will say, tall tales don't really exist in the outside world. They only exist in the storytelling world. And I say, well, have you met a parent with a small child? You want to hear an impossible story somebody really believes in? Ask a parent about their small child. People say it all the time. They'll say, oh, my kid's so strong, he can grab himself by the collar, pick himself up off the floor 2 feet. You hear it all the time. What were Timothy's parents going to say? Timothy can sit down for a minute and just be there for 6 hours. Timothy was always lazy, all right? And that's okay to criticize. It is okay to criticize someone for being lazy if you are willing to accept your responsibility for working to make the world a place that is worth working for. Move! Get out of the way! Move! A horse had broken loose from one of the carriages. Move! Get out of the way! And there was an axle pulled behind the horse, and the parade shot in all directions. Move! Get out of the way! And all of the crowds were worried that the horse was going to veer into the public. Everybody move! Get out of the way! And one board off the back of that axle flew through the air, and everyone was watching as that board was flying through the toward that toddler that was standing by herself. And Timothy, who no one had ever seen move with any motivation in his life. Timothy, who no one knew had it in him. Timothy, who was the only person close enough to that child to do anything at all. Timothy dove between that board and that baby. And when it happened, that board hit him. When it happened, that board hit him, and Timothy burst into 13 blackbirds. And everyone stared up, mouths agape. The only sound, a toddler who was perfectly safe, but crying because she had been so startled. Outside of the town, 10 of those 13 blackbirds came back together into Timothy. 10 out of 13 ain't bad, y'all. 10 out of 13 is a really good night in the NBA. Come on. In fact, from the outside, you would never have been able to notice that Timothy was just barely holding himself together. You would have only been able to see, if you looked really closely, there was a small hole in his chest right over his heart. That was the only part that seemed to obviously be missing. But Timothy was afraid to take that first step. He was afraid he might fall apart all over again. So Timothy just stood there. And he looked back at his town, where he comes from. He looked back at it from a distance, from a perspective that he had never seen before. It looked so small. And all he saw was everything he had taken for granted. He didn't see any of his criticisms. He saw everything he took for granted. It was so small that it looked like he could grab it with his hand. So he did. He reached back and plucked his town. And wouldn't you know it, friends? It was the exact size of that hole in his chest. So he placed it there. And that held Timothy together long enough to go in search of the rest of himself. Now let's do a weird one. This is a story that I actually like to call The Child and the Crowd. On the morning he was born, mother and youngster were encircled by all 11 of his sisters and brothers. And when the midwife tried to offer the child to the mother to hold, the mother crossed her arms in front of her own wide-eyed moan. She was just jerking in the bed, jerking her head, terrifying the entire family. Enochlophobia is what the doctors diagnosed her with. Ankylophobia is fancy doctor talk for fear of crowds. He was the 12th youngster, and on the morning that child was born, he became a member of his mother's monster. So that's how the child's weird life began. He was the 13th member of this family and the straw that broke the camel's back of his mother's imminent panic attacks. Everybody knows you can't cozy up to an ankylophobia mom. She was committed to an asylum for a while. And while inside, doctors were able to make her more comfortable with other people via the game Red Rover. She played it with other patients, and she was okay with the line of people on, listen. She was okay with the line of people on either side of her if she closed her eyes. There was only one person on each side if she just closed her eyes. How the rest of the kids coped? They say that the oldest one of those kids, she left and played Red Rover with her mother. But the rest, they just did the best they could without an aunt or an uncle or any others. They had no one to teach them, no one to guide them. So what did they do? They made up strange rituals as a way to get through the days. For instance, every hour on the hour for exactly 1 minute, the kids would couple up and they would do what they assumed was hugging. They would grab each other by the shoulders and say, there, over and over for exactly 1 minute. That's all they had to do. But here's the problem. There were 12 kids, and when the oldest one left, that meant there were 11 kids, which meant when they coupled up to hug, the 12th child was the odd man out. There were no hugs for that kid either on the hour or off. And that's what made that child an old man fast. By the age of 10, that kid had amassed a long, strange, gray beard. And without anyone to ask, he just decided for himself, it must be smoke. It was smoke billowing out of the sides of his face and the top of his neck and his chin. He just decided there must be some fire inside him. He would reach into his smoke and tug and yank and then look down at the strands of smoke. They looked to him like the brittlest, oldest bones. One night, while the oldest 10 kids coupled up to hug, the 12th child disappeared into the woods behind the house, walking west, which was where he had heard the water was. He walked for days and nights, surviving on wild gummy bears. This is before those had become extinct. He made it all the way through the woods, and he came out on the other side. And when he came out of the other side, he walked up to the edge of a cliff, and he looked down, and he saw the ocean water 100 feet beneath. And he saw all of that water. And he decided that that amount of water just might be enough water to snuff out that fire inside him. And that is why the child jumped. He woke up in a bed, bright lights. Am I dead? He said. And a voice in the room said, no, child, no. And the child said, where am I? And the doctor said, you're in a hospital. It's okay. You're in a hospital. Can you please try to open your eyes? So the child tried. And when he did, the doctor's face slowly came into focus. He was bald on the top, but had a long gray beard. And the child said, you're on fire too. And the doctor said, no, child. No, and neither are you. And the child reached up to put his hands in the man's smoke, but the doctor misunderstood, thought the kid was reaching up for a hug. So they did.
for well over a minute. And over the doctor's shoulder, that kid could see a clock on the wall. Tick, tock, tick. It said 6:16. Nowhere near on the hour. And the child thought, just maybe this meant this feeling he was having was a feeling he was allowed to have anytime.
Paul, your stories of complicated hope are simply wonderful. Thank you so much to our team of Amy's today. Aren't they doing a fabulous job? As we share the stories, they dance the stories and share them. It's beautiful to behold. I'd also like to thank Ron, our fabulous AV guy. Thank you, Ron. Johnny Thomas Fowler comes to us from South Carolina, and the past few days we have delighted in the stories of his North Carolina mountain roots, not far from where I live now. He's played with us the banjo and song, juice harp. He even played harmonica with his nose. Hey. He transforms our Florida stage into a Carolina porch. Please join me in welcoming Johnny Thomas Fowler.
How's everybody doing? It's great. Wonderful stories. Gosh, I mean, great stories. All of you. I have a story I like to tell you that I very rarely tell, except when I have this opportunity. And it is a true life story. All of it's 100%. Sometimes storytellers will tell you this is a true story, but we embellish it just a little bit. And it's a story about my grandmother. If you were here last night, I talked a little bit about my grandmother. About the same time that I was telling you last night, I'm about 5 years old. I'm just a little older than what I was. Anyway, my grandmother had special hands, real special hands. Your grandmother probably has special hands too. But my grandmother had wonderful hands. They weren't real hot or cold. They were soft and warm, that when they touched you, they whispered, "I love you." Sometimes, just out of nowhere, she'd reach up and grab a front of your forehead to see if you were hot. And if you seemed warm, she would bend over and press her brow up against yours as if she was looking inside your soul. And then she would proclaim, "I think you'll do. You'll be all right." That meant you were fine, you were not sick, you could go on and play. And I remember one time I was running through the backyard, I tripped and fell, busted my knee up. I thought pretty bad. It was bleeding. I knew what to do. Go to the house. I went inside that house and I sat down, tears running down my cheeks, but grandmother knew what to do. She took those special hands, she wiped the tears from my eyes. Took a little rag and cleaned the cut and put a little mercurochrome on the cut. And a Band-Aid, kissed it and proclaimed that I will live to see another day, and I'm here. She could work, mend, fix, do about anything. She was a hard worker. She could sweep the floor, mop. It seemed like she never stopped. I watched those hands go to work. They were amazing, amazing hands. She could sit down and hook a rug and have a conversation with you. All sorts of kind of things. Summertime rolled around. She'd go out and pick blackberries and work in the garden, scratch out a little piece and grow something and show you what she did with her hands. And picking blackberries, that Appalachian woman, she'd reach up and grab with one hand and rake down the vine and pick a whole handful of blackberries. Then we'd go back and make blackberry pies or cobblers or whatever. I remember one of the special things she could do. I was 5 years old, and she'd say, help me thread this needle. Once I got the needle thread, because I had really good eyes back then. Then she'd take one hand, and she'd tie a knot with those two pieces of thread. It was like magic. I can't even do it with both hands today, trying to tie a knot. It was magic. Now, when wintertime come along and it snowed a little bit outside, all of us youngins, we wanted to go outside and play, so she'd line us up and put scarves on us, toboggans, big coat, make sure the coats were all buttoned up, real good and tight. And then she'd slip socks on her hands because we didn't have any gloves. And take plastic bags, bread bags, and put them on your feet and tie them up so you could go outside and play. She did all that because of love. That's the way she showed us love. But that's not what I'm here to tell you. See, back when I was 5 years old, it was fall time. And, well, my dad wasn't around. He was out. He was in the military. He wouldn't be back home until after Christmas. There's no way for him to get back home. So we lived with my grandmother, my mother, brothers and sisters. And my mother came home from work one day early, and she said, I got some fair tickets. She had 2 tickets for me and my brother. Sister couldn't go. She was too small to take us early that afternoon to go to the fair. She came on a little bit early. She had those 2 tickets. And so we ate a little early, got into Fairlane Ford and drove over to the fair. And that was my first time at the fair. The lights, the smells, the popcorn. You know how that is. I was a little boy and I was just looking around. Mama had to kind of pull me, and we got to ride the little kiddie rides. And I remember she bought one big Coke, 3 straws, and a bag of popcorn. It was big. Went to the barn, saw all the animals, the donkeys, mules, pigs, and everything. Then we had to go see who won the pie contest. It turned out to be one of my mother's really best friends. And then it was time to go home. It was early, but I was tired. But I had a great time at the fair. My first time. It was wonderful. We went out, got in the fair lane forward, and Mama turned the key, and it wouldn't turn over. She said, "Oh, I think I left the lights on." I don't remember this, but somewhere somebody at the fair jumped us off, and we made it back home. I remember Mama tucking me in bed that night because I had all these wonderful memories. Woke up the next day and I found out that the car wouldn't start again. So Mama, in order to go to work, she had to get somebody at work to come by and pick her up. And my grandmother got us all ready for kindergarten at the church. We didn't call it daycare or anything like that. And she could walk us through the little woods to the church. It was real close by. And then at the end of the day, my mama got back home, and the plan was that my cousin Butch, after he got off to work at the Community and Cash, which is only about 2 or 3 blocks up the road, he was going to come down and charge my mama's car up so she could take it out and run it back and forth on the road until it got the battery all charged up. You know how that goes. And so she tucked us in, because he wouldn't be coming until after 8 o'clock. We went to bed about 7. And I got up the next day, and my mother wasn't there. Well, sometimes she got up and go to work. She got up and went to work early, And I looked out and her car wasn't there, so I thought, well, that's what happened. And everything's happening, early in the morning. I'm only 5 years old, and my grandmother's trying to take care of all of us, take us to the kindergarten. But I could tell something was wrong. Later on, I would learn in detail. See, what happened was when my mother went out to charge her car, she was riding down the road, just no more than about 3 or 4 miles down the road, and an 18-wheeler had blown a tire and came over and hit her car head on, and it messed that car up something terrible, and it messed my mother up real bad. Broke both her legs, broke her arm, fractured the other arm, broke all her ribs, collarbones, and threw glass in her face. And I remember my grandmother telling me that she had an accident. I think later on I got all the details and everything. That's when things changed in my life at that time. Didn't realize all these changes were going to happen, but that's when things changed. And my grandmother would take us to the kindergarten, and then she'd spend her time at the hospital. She didn't drive, so she had to take a city bus into town, and then come back, make sure you got back in time to take care of our needs. This went on for about 8-10 weeks. I remember going to the hospital one time and seeing my mother, who did not look like the mother I remembered, all broken up and everything. But lucky for us, on December the 14th, she was going to come home. See, the church provided a hospital bed, $5 a week, and my mother could be transported back home. She wouldn't be able to get around, but she would be home with us by Christmas time. And that was important to her and to us. And I remember the day they brought her home, the ambulance brought her home and placed her in the bed, and there she was. And that's when my grandmother, special hands took over again. I watched as she took care of her daughter. She helped feed her, helped clothe her, combed her hair, washed her hair, everything she needed, and also took care of us too. It was amazing. I learned so much. And it was Christmas time, and I remember us taking turns setting up in the bed and watching the black and white TV that somebody had loaned us from church, and I got to be the person that was in charge of operating the TV, the remote, if you want to call that. Changing the channels. And there was one story I remember watching as a Hallmark type story about a moose that had been lost trying to find his way home. And for some odd reason, I equate that with my mother's story at that time. And the house that we lived in, the way it was heated, it had one big, huge wood burning stove there. It was in the front room. And my mother's room off from the front room was just right there. You could stand at the wood stove and peek over this way and see Mom. And my grandmother had a little box fan going, and it was turning, and it would warm everything up in her room. Everything was going real good, and I'd watch my mother stoke that stove, and she'd take her poker and put some wood in there in the morning time, and then in the middle of the day, nighttime before we went to bed, and put a little coal in there every once in a while too. One evening, we had just got through eating, and my grandmother was in washing dishes, and all us three were playing around the stove because that was the warmest part of the house. My mom was laying in bed. She was reading. She couldn't get up. She was reading. And I heard a big thump, and I got up to investigate. I walked behind, and I saw the stovepipe had fallen, and there was fire rushing out from the stove end. It was going to catch the house on fire. So I got up and I went and told my grandmother. I said, the stovepipe fell. She didn't say anything. She took a wet dish rag, and I followed her back into the front room, and I watched. And from my vantage point, I could see my mom laying in bed. She was calling out, "What's going on? What happened?" And I watched as my grandmother bent down, and she grabbed with her bare hands in that rag, that dish rag. And she put that pipe back together with a grunt and a prayer. It fit back together. And I don't know if you've ever tried to put a stovepipe together just by itself. It's hard to do. But she fit that back together. And I looked at my mother and I realized the power of what had just happened. Well, after a while, my mom, she got better, and she got back walking and everything. Couldn't run anymore and everything. Had the scars. Lived to be 85 years old. Tough woman. So everything worked out there, but I carry that. That's a powerful character changing to see that. And I look back today and I think what could have happened or what might have happened. And I realized my grandmother's hands were not just there to repair broken pipes, but she was there to take care of family at tough times and make sure we all had what we needed. She had special hands. Did I tell you? They weren't hot or cold, warm and soft with a touch that when they touched you, they were saying, "I love you." Thank you.
So sometimes angels look like strangers, sometimes they look like chihuahuas, and sometimes they look like grandmas. All right? Thank you, John. Wow. How did we get here already? We're nearly at the close of this fabulous festival. And as we prepare to say goodbye to this special time that we've shared together, we can console ourselves by thoughts of next year's festival, which will be right here at the Lakeside Inn in Mount Dora, January the 22nd through the 25th. When you wake up your magical rectangular information device, go straight to the calendar, put those dates in, and mark them. Our featured tellers next year will be Megan Wells, Michael Reno Harrell, George O., Midge Byram, and me. What a pleasure it has been during this festival to experience the artistry of Tamara Green. She brings her characters to life with such energy from the top of her turban to the bottom of her fabulous shoes. Her energy is both engaging and entertaining, and it feeds the soul. Let us welcome our final teller of this festival, Tamara Green.
It has just been marvelous being here, and I so thank you for inviting me here at this wonderful festival. And thank you all of the people who put this together. This is not an easy thing to do. Give them a hand. It's not an easy thing to do. So I am going to tell an ancient Hebrew story. And this is a story about faith and the persistence of a woman who wants to keep her child alive. Sometimes when we are not sure about God or the God of the universe, and others are sure, it's okay to just lean on somebody else that has some faith that we don't. And that's what happened here. Once, there was a prophet by the name of Elijah. And Elijah would travel back and forth to a city called Shunem. And everybody knew that he was a holy man of God because he would pray for people in the marketplace. And there was this woman in Shunem. This woman was well off. She saw the prophet. And one day she invited him to have a meal with her and her husband. And he said, yes, I can do that. And so he had a meal with the woman and her husband. And after the meal, she said to her husband, do you suppose that we could maybe build a house and attach it, a room, and attach it to our house so that when Elijah comes to the city, he could go there and relax? Do you think we can do that? And her husband said, yes, we can do that. We can do that. And so they built a room and attached it to their house. And when the old prophet would come through, he would stay there in that house. And one day, as he was relaxing there in the city of Shunem, he said to his servant Gehazi, go and ask the Shunammite woman, is there anything that we can do for her? She's been so kind as to take care of us. Perhaps I could give a word to the king or maybe to the captain of the host. Now, the captain of the host would be the military, someone in the military maybe. And so Gehazi did as he was told to do. He went to the Shunammite woman and he asked her, is there anything that we could do for you? Perhaps a word to the king or to the captain of the host. And the woman said, no, I have everything that I need. I live among my own people. No. So Gehazi went back to Elijah and told Elijah what the woman had said, that she didn't need anything. And then Gehazi remembered that the woman did not have any children. She didn't have a son. And he told that to Elijah. And Elijah himself called the woman to him. And she came and stood in the doorway. And he said to the woman, this time next year, you will have a son. And the woman said, oh no, my Lord. I know my husband and I, we are way past the time to have a child. No. But that very next year, the woman was holding a son. And the boy grew straight and tall. And one day, as he was in the fields with the rest of the workers, he stood up and he held his head and he said, my head, and he fell. And his father told the workers to take his son to his mother and place the boy in the mother's lap. And they did what they were told. And the boy stayed in his mother's lap all day. And at 12 o'clock noon, the boy died. And of course, the woman was sad. But she remembered something. She remembered something. She wiped the tears from her eyes. Because if the prophet had said once, one time, he could say once again. So she told the servants to take her son and put him in the room where the prophet lay. And they did that. And then she went to her husband and she told her husband to tell the servants to prepare a mule for her so that she could go to the prophet. She wanted to go to the prophet. And her husband said, it is not the Sabbath. It's not a good idea. But the woman said, no, it'll be okay. And of course, the servant did prepare the mule for the woman. And she told the servant that she was going to the prophet. And no matter how hard the ride was, to go as fast as they could. And they both went to the prophet together. In the meantime, Elijah could see the woman from afar off, but he did not know what the problem was. It had not been revealed to him, but he could see her coming. And so Elijah told his servant Gehazi to go and meet this Shunammite woman and asked the woman if all was well with her, if all was well with her husband, and if all was well with her son. So Gehazi took the hem of his garment. In those days, men wore long tunics. And he put the hem of his garment inside of his girdle. In modern day times, that would be a belt. And he did that so that his legs would be free for activity. And he got on his mule and he rode towards the woman as fast as he could. And when he got there, he said to the Shunammite woman, "Is all well with you?" And the Shunammite woman said, "All is well," as she rode. "Is all well with your husband?" And the Shunammite woman said, "All is well." "Is all well with your son?" And the Shunammite woman said, "All is well." And she continued on to the prophet. And when she got there, she fell at his feet. Now, apparently, Gehazi must have thought that she was some threat to the prophet. So he tried to pull the woman away from Elijah, but Elijah said, "No, leave her alone. She's in distress." And she said, when she stood up, "Why? Why did you take my child? Did I ask for this child? Why?" Now, the prophet knew that he had to do something. He had allowed this to happen. He had given her this child. He had to do something. So he took his staff and he gave it to Gehazi. And he told Gehazi to go and place the staff on the boy's face. And Gehazi did what he was supposed to do. He placed that staff on the boy's face. But when he got to Shunem and placed that staff on the boy's face, the boy did not move. He did not wake up. So Gehazi came back to the prophet and told the prophet that the boy was still dead. Well, the woman told Elijah that she was not leaving his side. And they both set out for the city. Elijah and the woman of Shunem together went. And when they got there, Elijah went into the room where the boy lay dead on the bed. And he placed his face and his eyes on the boy's face and eyes. And he into the boy's mouth, and his body waxed warm. Then he got up off of the bed, and he walked back and forth, and back and forth. And then he stretched himself on the boy's body. And the child sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. And then Elijah called to Gehazi, "Go and get this Shunammite woman." And the woman, the mother, came into the room. And again, she fell at the prophet's feet and gathered herself. And then she picked up her child and she went out. And that is the story of the Shunammite and her son.
Getting the last minute instructions. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you for bringing us to this place and this closing of the festival. Before we all part ways, we have a few announcements from our Florida Storytelling President, Deborah, and Monica Ladd. Yes. Oh.
I just want to say thank you. We hope we will see all of you next year joining us. You can go on our website and find us. There are some people standing in the back that we need to acknowledge because these are our worker bees. So let's give them a round of applause. Some of them are sitting. To Janelle for being our MC. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. May you take these stories home with you. May you tell your own. Monica?
So this entire weekend, we have told you to put these away. We would like you, because we want our family to grow in storytelling, we now have a Yelp and Google page for the Florida Storytelling Association and the festival. So in order for us to grow when people are making their vacation plans for Mount Dora, we will pop up now on those hotel websites and everything. We would love it if you could go on there in the next few days and let them know what a great time you had here. Thank you. And don't forget, before you go, we also have our own Florida Storytelling survey that we would love for you to fill out so we can make sure that you have a great time next year.
Before we all say goodbye, I'd like to bring our featured tellers back onto the stage for one final thank you. Carol Birch, Tamara Green, Linda Chancey Guice, Paul Strickland, Johnny Thomas Walker. What a festival they have given us. As you leave, if you would please help us by taking your chairs and stacking them on the pallets out there. How many remember Carol Burnett? Let's finish as she finished. I'm so glad we had this time together, just to have a laugh and sing a song. Seems we just get started, and before we know it, comes the time we have to say so long.